The NFL offseason is officially here, and some key Lamar Jackson news was revealed.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, and thanks so much to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners that were somewhere in the middle. Thank you as well. We have 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content for you, even in the offseason. We're year-round. Of course, the NFL offseason officially kicking off today as the Seattle Seahawks and Ravens coach, or former Ravens coach, Mike Macdonald, is now a Super Bowl champion after the Seahawks defeated the Patriots. We have a lot to talk about here today, though, I guess, on our kickoff episode of the 2026 NFL offseason. Baltimore's been there for a while, but now everybody officially is here. We'll talk about some key Lamar Jackson information being revealed, some of it which is kind of new, and other information which we already assumed and knew. So we'll talk about that in the first part of the show. Then in the second part of the show, an ESPN insider linked the Ravens and Maxx Crosby. So we'll talk about what that report was, and we'll have a conversation about Maxx Crosby. And then finally, a new season begins. We'll talk about the Super Bowl a little bit. We'll talk about some other things relating to this Ravens team, what they need to do, really dive into our first true offseason preview, albeit kind of a mini one. And then we'll, of course, get into more of that conversation as the days, weeks, and months go on. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right. Lamar Jackson information being revealed. Again, everybody now with the head coach situation all sorted out in Baltimore. Jesse Minter, both coordinator spots are all sorted out. Still a couple more positions to fill. The biggest one probably, I guess, being the special teams coordinator at this point. But now that that's all situated and settled, all eyes and all attention here in Baltimore can now turn to Lamar Jackson, and it's going to be his contract extension, right? That's the thing that everybody is going to be looking at and looking for. Lamar Jackson has an over $70 million cap hit. We all know that. The Ravens cannot operate with that being the way that it is. So there was a report over on the insiders, and this was, Tom Pelissero, Ian Rappaport, Mike Garafolo, and Mike Garafolo ended up talking about Lamar Jackson, and started off by saying, there's a lot of stuff about Lamar. Is he going to get traded? He said, no, we're going to dive into some of this extension thing. And the actual headline on the ticker was Ravens and Lamar Jackson to discuss contract extension in the near future. And then Garafolo went on to say, quote, this stuff, everybody was kind of wondering, all right, how big of an impact did Lamar Jackson have in the head coaching process specifically, right? Eric DeCosta didn't specify names. We heard here and there Lamar was involved in some way. But again, this coming from Mike Garafolo, Mike said, quote, Lamar Jackson was part of the head coaching process. He was on the virtual interviews with head coach candidates. He was consulted for the offensive coordinator job. Add all that up, and folks would be flabbergasted if the Ravens moved on from him. And so you're getting a lot of information like, yes, okay, now we have that information about, okay, we all kind of understood and kind of assumed that Lamar, yes, he was involved. That's not a big deal or anything like that because, all right, we already kind of had an idea of that information. But there's just stuff about all these trade reports and trade rumors about Lamar Jackson that really just, if I'm being honest, haven't gone anywhere. It's more so I think people just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what'll stick. Genuinely, there's been no inclination that the Ravens would ever be interested in moving Lamar right now. There's no reason to move Lamar right now. It wouldn't make sense to move Lamar right now. But again, it's people trying to stir that pot up, and I just don't understand when, again, you're trying to throw out this information, but the information of Lamar being a part of the head coaching process and all that, you couldn't get that information either, and then put two and two together and say, hey, if he was consulted on the OC, he was part of that process, why would they move on from Lamar? So, look, the whole Lamar being traded thing, I honestly, if you've noticed, I haven't really put a lot of energy into that this offseason. I haven't really talked about it on the show because to me, genuinely, like when it hasn't come from any like I think the biggest person it's come from is Mike Florio and Mike Florio and Lamar Jackson. Mike Florio might not think it's a weird relationship, but Lamar Jackson, I'm pretty sure certainly does. So it hasn't been something worth talking about, so I'm not going to talk about it. The big thing is getting Lamar Jackson's contract extension done. Again, Garofalo with the thing on the ticker saying that they're gonna discuss a contract extension in the near future. Again, like what Steve Bisciotti said about the situation in the press conference, this to me is all lining up for this to get done before free agency starts. Now, again, I can't guarantee that. I wish I could, but that's what's best for all parties here, in my opinion, right? Lamar Jackson gets another well-deserved payday and a pay raise. But you also have the Ravens who understand that, yeah, $70+ million is not going to cut it in terms of a cap hit. And if this goes on and drags on up until like beyond start of free agency, I mean, that's a situation that harms the Ravens. And I remember, back in that first contract negotiation situation with Lamar when he was on the non-exclusive franchise tag and that cap hit. I mean, that went into the draft, and the Ravens couldn't do what they needed to do in free agency that year because Lamar was taking up so much of that cap. So it just that the first time that this all happened, again, it was a much different situation where Lamar was technically a free agent. He's not a free agent. Like there's no, was the team going to go sign him? And again, if you remember, that was a non-exclusive tag where if a team signed him, the Ravens didn't match the offer, they would have gotten 2 first-round picks. Like it was a mess. This to me feels a lot more straightforward in the way that Lamar is going to be able to hopefully, and the Ravens are going to be able to hopefully get this done together before the start of free agency. But again, feels like Lamar is good with the hires here. Feels like he, again, based off of this, is cool with them. He hasn't said anything, at least to my knowledge, about either of those guys. But what I think the most important part of this is that we know that Lamar is the quarterback of this team. There's just a lot about Lamar Jackson and the way that he's talked about, and that's not a conversation for right now. I mean, we've had that conversation over and over again. The conversation is, I honestly think that like not a lot can get jump started until Lamar's contract gets signed. Everybody's looking at Tyler Linderbaum's potential extension, a new contract in Baltimore. Yeah, that'd be great, but you can't sign Linderbaum. And again, you can move the money around on Linderbaum's deal, make it backloaded and whatnot, but for a guy that, again, on Spotrac, they have him at about $17 million. I expect him to get more like 20, but it's tough to kind of prioritize. All right, you're signing Linderbaum to a big money contract, depending on what that first year cap hit is, you'll have to see. But for right now, that extension, Lamar, that one will jumpstart the offseason, assuming it gets done. Now, Bisciotti was very clear that if it does not get done, they will do the void year thing and move that money around in a different way. He said, essentially that there's a way to get it done without getting the Lamar extension done. But there has been nothing but prioritization of Lamar Jackson, public support of Lamar Jackson. And it just feels like we're still in these like, is Lamar going to be a Raven next year? Could he get traded for the number 1 overall pick? Like what? There's just nothing. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So it was awesome to hear, I guess, officially from Mike Garofalo that, yes, I mean, he was involved in the process. And again, that's not something that was a shock to me. We had heard rumblings of that and we had talked about it here on this show. But now I just think this report, hopefully, and I'll be honest with you, it probably won't, but hopefully this will just put all those Lamar Jackson trade rumors to rest and the Ravens can prioritize this and then Linderbaum. And then, I've kind of counted out likely at this point, but we'll get more into that in the final part of the show. Lamar is a guy that he fits the Ravens right now, right? He fits what they do. He's still evolving. And to say that about a 2-time MVP should be 3-time MVP is just absolutely crazy to me. That he's already so incredibly elite. And I think that he can be unlocked even more in a Declan Doyle offense under Jesse Minter. And that's the thing, right? When Lamar was going through that process the first time, one of the things I said on this show, I want him to be a Raven for life. And I said, I don't want to be robbed of the opportunity to see Lamar Jackson in a non-Greg Roman offense. I want to see that. I want to see him be able to spread his wings. Now, I think this is another opportunity with a new system, a new era of Ravens football, to see Lamar in that. So again, there's no doubt in my mind that Lamar Jackson will be back with this team in 2026 and beyond. And like that thought is not even crossing my mind. But I just think, again, I want to express like the excitement of like, okay, once they get the extension done or once they just figure out the money and whatnot, and they can move forward with their offseason, kind of like building this final form around him, this final form team around him, hopefully, which we'll get a little bit too more in the final part of the show as well. But that is also a really exciting thing to me too, because, getting him a line that can protect him and, kind of going back to those years where he did have an offensive line that protected him. We saw who he could be. And, there are a lot of examples of that, but unfortunately this year, the line just couldn't do it. So I'm excited for Lamar, and, one of the many things I'm very excited about with this team, but now we can officially say it, right? The extension, prioritizing it. You got him involved in the head coach process. You got him involved in the OC process. All right. I don't want to hear any more trade rumors. We're done with that. It was never a possibility in the first place. Was weird to bring up in the first place. We can just put it all to rest now. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about the Ravens and Maxx Crosby being linked together by an NFL insider. So stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years, and that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events, to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast, speed skating races decided by inches, hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish, and the Olympics has so much to offer. Over on FanDuel, they have you covered. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. We can officially close the book on the 2025 season with the Super Bowl being done and move ahead to 2026. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Thanks so much for all of your support, both video form and audio form. It's been an incredible journey. We are 5 days a week plus more Day of the Ravens coverage here on Locked On Ravens. We have the regular show Monday through Friday and at 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also have bonus episodes on the weekend when there are headlines. We have instant reaction shows after pieces of big Ravens news, and after every single game during the season. We have watch-alongs during the season. The Locked On Ravens squad show twice a week. Myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. That's Mondays and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll be back here later tonight with that. Plus, we got the Everyday Club on Locked On Ravens. It's now live. You get exclusive access to one-on-one text conversations with me. We got weekly Q&As as well as access to Discord server, ad-free episodes, and a lot more. So if you want to check that out, link in the description down below, as well as on the Locked On website on the Locked On Ravens page. All right, well, we had a fun conversation in the first part of the show because, again, Lamar Jackson, according to the insiders, Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, and Mike Garafolo, who delivered the news, Lamar is expected to enter contract negotiation talks with the Ravens this offseason. Of course, that is due to the fact that he has that $74.5 million cap hit, something to work on there. Talked about his involvement in the coaching process and the trade rumors and all that. Well, let's now dive into some more trade rumors with Maxx Crosby. And, this has been a situation that a lot of people have been monitoring for a while. Crosby and Las Vegas have seemed to be headed for a split for a little bit. And, there is a lot to still be determined about whether he will actually be traded or not from Las Vegas. But there's been a lot of buzz around the situation. And he was apparently, Maxx Crosby, according to Jeremy Fowler, a very hot topic in San Francisco. And Crosby has made it clear to Fowler, at least that's what what's been made clear about Crosby to Fowler is that Crosby wants to be a part of a winning team, but Crosby, right now on the Raiders is not on a winner. So Fowler said, quote, "The reality is the Raiders are still far away from significant winning, and the trade interest in Crosby is incredibly robust. In fact, I believe more than a dozen teams, possibly up to 20, will at least inquire with levels of serious intent. And there are some natural would-be contenders, including the Bills, Lions, 49ers, Cowboys, and Ravens." So the Ravens were named by Jeremy Fowler here. Again, this is initial. There's not oh, hey, the Ravens are definitely interested in Maxx Crosby. But I'll tell you, I think that they would be. There's just a lot of different conversations surrounding Maxx Crosby. And it's a lot of similar stuff compared to what we talk about on the show with big trade candidates and big trade targets. Crosby, as Fowler notes, has been very fiercely loyal to Las Vegas. But again, you have to determine, if you're Crosby, what matters to you right now, that loyalty or winning, because the Raiders are still at least a couple of years away. Crosby's going to be 29 right before the start of the NFL season. Now, Crosby's someone that would demand a lot in terms of a trade package, right? That's not a question whatsoever. So when you look at that, there have been a couple of mock trades that have already been put out there by multiple different sites. A lot of those trade packages have at least 2 first-round picks in them. You also have young players that are involved in these deals, right? And there are a lot of young players that Baltimore could potentially involve in a deal like that if Vegas were to ask for a young player, right? Would that be a Rashod Bateman? Would it be a Tez Walker? Would it be a Tavius Robinson or Trenton Simpson or TJ Tampa or someone like that? Some of those guys that you're trading would be easier to trade than others, especially with some of the potential that those guys have. But Maxx Crosby is Maxx Crosby. Now, if you're trading multiple first-round picks and a young player or two, that's a very steep price to pay for one player. And, I'm not denying Maxx Crosby's greatness. I would love Maxx Crosby to be in Baltimore, right? He's a beast. 10 sacks for the Raiders this past season. He's never had a season below 7 sacks in his 7 years in the NFL. And his past 4 seasons, he had 12.5 sacks, 14.5 sacks, then 7.5 sacks in just 12 games, and then 10 sacks in 15 games. Those first 2 years, he was fully healthy, played a full 17 games that year. So, Maxx Crosby is really good. He's really good. And he'd instantly become the best pass rusher on this Ravens team. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But when you look at Maxx Crosby and his contract, he signed a 3-year, $106 million deal with the Raiders. He's going to have that deal, his cap hit is going to be $35 million. If you trade for him, that money kind of moves around. I'm not sure essentially what that looks like, but his base salary is $30 million. So, in terms of tradable or whatnot, the Ravens have to find a way to make that work. But there are a lot of other conversations just about okay, Crosby with the capital and with the maybe young player and with the potential contract, is he worth it? Or if you sign a Trey Hendrickson, for example, or Khalil Mack, someone that might not be as good as Crosby, but is still a pretty good pass rusher, and you can get that guy for free, essentially, in terms of not giving up your draft capital and not giving up any young players, is that more worth it? And, if that is a little bit less money, could you then use maybe your first round pick on a guard or in the trenches or whatnot? This was a question we posed on the squad show. If it was Maxx Crosby and no offensive line help versus Trey Hendrickson, and you can get 2 decent guards to put next to Lamar, I would probably take Trey Hendrickson. Again, Crosby's also someone who has dealt with, his fair share of injuries and, stuff along those lines, little things that he gets banged up with or whatnot. That's another thing you have to take into account. Again, he was healthy in those 2 years I read off early in 2022 and 2023 when he was incredible. But the past 2 seasons, he has missed some time, 12 games in 2024 and then 15 in 2025. Now, Crosby is a warrior. He fights through stuff. He plays through stuff. He's a competitor. I think he'd fit in with what this Ravens team wants to do. And again, to me, you have to make a big splash this offseason. Does that mean Maxx Crosby has to be that splash? No, but he's a guy that makes a lot of sense based off of your needs. And again, the Ravens, like, the two big needs for them are in the trenches, right? It's offensive line and it's defensive line. But I think wide receiver is a sneaky need this offseason, depending on what they do with some of their guys. Maybe you can look to, like, the secondary has so much investment in it. Like, it's just a lot of investment. But, you can maybe look to the cornerback position, depending on if they decide they want to trade Marlon Humphrey or move off of Marlon Humphrey and what happens to Chidobe Awuzie. There is a lot that has to happen here for the Ravens this offseason. But what I do know is that you need to fix your pass rush. You need to fix your offensive line. The other stuff that will happen, like, again, if you can get another big-time wide receiver in for Lamar Jackson, that'd be really cool. I've been banging the table for that for years for Lamar. But, to me, Crosby would be like, okay, you have Kyle Hamilton and you have Maxx Crosby and maybe now Madubuike comes back. And, but just on that defensive line in particular, I know Hamilton's not a part of that, but he's like your star guy. You got Nate in that secondary. But then if your pass rush rotation becomes Maxx Crosby, Mike Green, Tavius Robinson, you got Travis Jones, Aeneas Peebles, maybe Nnamdi Madubuike back in that fold. I mean, that is a dominant front and something that just helps everybody out on the Ravens. So again, Crosby to me would be awesome, but there is a lot more that comes into that. And if the Raiders start to ask, like, I have to see it to believe it with the Ravens trading first-round picks and Eric DeCosta trading first-round picks. Like, and these deals are like, oh, hey, you got to trade 2 for him or 3. I mean, that's a lot of capital. That's a lot of capital. And again, I'm not trying to also dismiss the fact that, rookie contracts, particularly first, guys on rookie contracts, like first rounders, those are really valuable, especially for a team like the Ravens, who is about to pay Lamar, hopefully with an extension, a lot of money, and other guys, a lot of money like Linderbaum, hopefully as well. You need to be able to find contributors on rookie deals that can help you out for 3, 4, 5, however many years it is. So I'm excited at the possibility of adding a guy like Crosby. Again, this to me is the year to make that splash. I know Ravens have kind of held off on it for the last couple of years. I think if you're Eric DeCosta, you want to make a splash this year, because if things don't go well, that's a different conversation in terms of what that could mean for people in the organization. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we will dive into a little bit about the new season beginning, a little bit about the Super Bowl, and a little bit about some more Jesse Minter hires. So stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. First, this show is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for. Trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posted on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs. Put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for this show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves. Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Let's go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Thanks again for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. If you have a friend or a family member who's a Ravens fan or wants some daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them over here our way on Locked On Ravens. We have amazing communities, video form, audio form, social media. You can follow me over on social media at KaosStriker34, Twitter, Instagram, the whole 9 yards. Actually, Friday was our 1,700th consecutive episode of this show. I've never missed an episode on the weekdays here, dating back to 2019 when I started this thing. And again, we're year round here on Locked On Ravens. So even in the off season, we're here for you, giving you 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Well, I think a lot of people are excited about the Super Bowl for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, Mike Macdonald winning it for the Seahawks. A big congratulations to him and his team. I mean, it's unbelievable to see, where he was 2 years ago and kind of knowing who he could be as a head coach at this level, and then going and doing it in Seattle. Obviously, I wish that was here in Baltimore. I had said that I think that the move was to fire Harbaugh and hire Macdonald. But I just also knew that they were not going to do that after John Harbaugh and the Ravens made the AFC Championship game. So you know what? It's done now. Jesse Minter's the head coach. Hopefully he's next because, hey, Mike Macdonald, defensive play caller, that's a big deal. Him calling defensive plays and winning the Super Bowl. I mean, that's huge. So hopefully that sets a precedent. And again, I think defense wins championships. The hot thing now is to hire an offensive mind and all that, like Clint Kubiak, who admitted he's going to Vegas and revealed that. It was already reported, but he confirmed it. Kubiak would have been awesome in Baltimore. But I think that this gives me even added optimism for Jesse Minter being that guy in Baltimore and doing his thing because of what Macdonald did in such a short amount of time there to turn that franchise around. You know, might not be year one of Jesse Minter. I'd love it to be, but you know, Macdonald did it in 2 years. All right, hey, you tell me in 2 years Jesse Minter is hoisting up that Lombardi trophy. I'm taking that 10 times out of 10. So it was honestly one of the best defensive performances we've ever seen in Super Bowl history. I mean, that Seattle defense was swarming. It was a rough day at the office for Drake May. They made him look like a second-year quarterback, a guy with a lot of inexperience. And that's typical Ravens thing to do also, right? Like the Ravens, that's something that they were known for. Mike Macdonald brought that to Seattle. He did it there. So again, like offense wins games, but defense wins championships. You know, you have Lamar Jackson there. If you just build up this defense, you bring it back to that 2000s level, that 2023 level, 2006. Like you have a really good formula already. Kenneth Walker did his thing, so you got Derrick Henry in there. I feel like the Ravens, again, they're close, but it starts with this offseason and what they have to do. You know, that's the big topic of conversation that we're going to have a lot here over the course of this offseason of like the base roster. It's already there. It's already there, but you have to continue to round it out or else this team is going to go where they need to go. So it's a big offseason in terms of getting guys back under contract like Linderbaum and Stout and some of those guys, bringing in some new faces in free agency. You know, this has to be a formula shift for the Ravens as well, where like the comp pick thing and you're trying to like maneuver through that. No, just sign a guy who's going to help you win football games, who's going to help you win a Super Bowl. This team doesn't need to have double-digit draft picks anymore. Like I said, draft picks are important, but there's just not enough room on this roster for those guys, in my opinion. So you have all that and you go through the draft, you make a big trade, you work everything in. You leave no stone unturned like you did through the head coach process. And I think the Ravens will be able to take that really good base roster with a new coaching staff and with additions and be right back in the Super Bowl conversation next year. Now, Jesse Minter did make some more hires. Patrick Kramer, according to Matt Zenitz, he's going to be a member of their offensive staff. Just Rebeck later confirming he'll be a quality control coach. Also, Rick Minter, Jesse Minter's father, he's a longtime college and NFL coach. He was a defensive consultant for the Chargers. He'll join Jesse in Baltimore. And Christina DeReuter, the director of football logistics for the Chargers last year, she will also join Jesse Minter in Baltimore. So everything moving and grooving. Offseason officially here. I am pumped up. Offseason, I love going through. We'll go through mock drafts. We'll go through free agency, guys who they could sign, trade targets. I love this time of year. Every part of the year is fun for me. It's in different ways. So Ravens officially begin their new journey with the Super Bowl being in the books, and I'm excited to see how this offseason shapes up for them. That's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens, though. Thank you so much for tuning into the show on the web. Be sure to like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be back here with our regularly scheduled programming. We'll also be back here tonight with the Locked On Ravens squad show. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.